Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time, and here's a video that I never thought I'd do. Why, you may ask? Well, to understand that we'd have to go back a couple years, to 2016, when a YouTuber, Colossal Is Crazy, you know, the one you twats won't stop comparing me to, released his long overdue video on FouseyTUBE, named An Alternate Reality. I was just initiating my interest into commentary. I'd had a YouTube channel for about 6 months, but I'd been stuck in a bit of a rut and the videos I made were very niche. People had messaged me from time to time saying, "Oh my god, you sound like Colossal Is Crazy." And although I didn't particularly hear the resemblance myself, I guess anyone with a remotely posh accent sounds like clown to you bastards who don't live in the UK. Alright, you American knobs, I get that your freeways have gaps in between them the size of Buckingham Palace, but we're not all that local. Anyhow, before I get carried away on that very unique tangent, the point is I literally knew no one, and I got ushered into his Discord server and then presented to his content. And I'm not gonna lie, it was quite the encounter. I'd never heard of Fousey, so this video was my introduction, and it was a pretty comprehensive deconstruction of what Fousey stood for. What I admired about it was that it managed to make a greater narrative on FouseyTUBE as a person from mere surface value content, which is what I have always wanted to do with my channel. One of the responses that I loathe the most when criticizing people is the line, "You don't know them, how can you talk about their intentions?" I do not know his intentions, but I have my opinions based on what I have observed. Fousey is a perfect example of how someone cannot explicitly commit any wrongdoings, but have the most corrupted ideas of what he wants to gain from his content and the people watching it. This is generally what I took away from Colossal's video. Although these sample videos were limited, he did a great job creating an elaborate character portrait, and really I didn't feel the necessity to cover it any more than I did back in the day. I did a video criticizing his motivation to push a political agenda through his content, as that was a bit more in my direction, and then his decision to copyright strike Colossal for content that was clearly fair use. My interaction with his content has been minimal otherwise. And honestly, after he'd gone on a pretty prolonged hiatus, I thought I'd never deal with him again. I mean, what more is there to know about him? Admittedly, I wasn't that interested. I assumed he was just a shitty person in a powerful position, but oh my. Looks like we've got some revisiting to do. Because recently, people have been claiming he's flying off the rails into something rather worrying, something that not even the extensive lengths of Colossal's video covered. A strange insanity that I felt the need to investigate, and perhaps explain. You see, he planned and hosted something that was branded as FouseyCon. It was marketed as this big event with multiple artists. It basically was just Fousey having a massive tirade with a few musicians and Lit Pappy, the greatest artist of all time. And speaking of music, Fousey has started releasing his own, which once again, he's more than at liberty to. However, regarding the convention, he made lots of wild claims, one of which was the assertion that Drake was going to be performing, which apparently wasn't quite the case. Well, wasn't the case at all. There is a ton of footage of him behaving extremely erratically and impulsively, and it's very easy for commentators to look at him right now and try and explain what's going on in the moment, because it is bizarre. Very bizarre. There are claims about his mental health, the idea that he's not on medication, bipolar, depression, mania, and it's very possible. But there are other people with more of an insight into that currently, so I'd urge you to go and check out those videos, because I am many things, but I'm not quite rolling with the big boys of YouTube yet. Though I'm sure it's only a matter of time, lads, until me and Daddy Keem are united. Anyhow, before I lose myself in sweet daydreams of a better time, I need to discuss the man in question, FouseyTUBE. Now, Colossal's still working on part 2 of his video, so I want to avoid stepping on his toes, but I don't want it to be a surface level analysis either, so I'm gonna try and give you a little cocktail with a little twist, a little fireball in there. I'd also like to say that although it is important to be sensitive of whatever mental conditions a person may suffer from, it doesn't necessarily alleviate criticism that can be levied a person's way, especially as a public figure, which is why, although I may be empathetic to any disorders he's suffering from, I will be doing my best to keep his actions separate from anything that may influence it. As his career shows, he clearly has the capability to take some level of responsibility for himself. Unfortunately, Fousey has placed himself in an occupation that is continuously in the public eye, and as a functioning human being, he can't expect special treatment, especially as he expects to exercise the same influence over those around him as his contemporaries. So today what I plan to do is to have a good delve into the background of FouseyTUBE and what may have led him down the road that took him to this.
You're heating up your breakfast when I'm heating up my dinner.
Delicious. There has to be an explanation. So without further ado, let's get to it. Everyone knows Fousey, but does anyone really know Yusuf Erakat? I'm sure that's a question he throws around a lot towards his detractors. Well, let's have a look into his history. Fousey is obviously notorious for his pranks, a little escapade that we'll definitely investigate sooner or later. However, he started his channel in a different direction, comedy. This wasn't a fruitless venture either, in fact it was highly fortuitous for him. His video on Middle Eastern parents was reported to have garnered over 2 million views by 2012, and it makes sense in a way. He tapped into a very popular element of comedy, stereotypes, and satirized them to a classic early 2010s effect, where the intention was favoured over the execution. I could bash into how he's kind of whoring out his ethnicity, but I don't think that's a worthwhile discussion, as I think you can't really prove anything. Well, not yet at least, apart from the fact that his degree in theatre arts clearly didn't cover font design. Oh yes, that's sexy. But you know what, it's passable, inoffensive comedy, and it clearly resonated with an audience, especially on Tumblr. What else would I expect? It was 2011, comedy was tame. Let's Players were big, everything was just about being loud, expressive, and eye-catching, rather than really being challenging to the viewer. So it did that, and people watched it. A lot of what happened around this time is now privated, however, he did have a very interesting interview, which weirdly echoed some of the stuff he said last week. One of the Fousey videos at the time, the Dance Dare one, was shown on Ellen. In this interview with the Mercury News, he said how his short-term goal was to get on her show.
Next week, I'll be sitting with Ellen telling her how I pulled this off.
Interesting. Generally, he's documented in this early period as being this very charitable bloke, doing all these nice things, saying all this pseudo-inspirational bollocks. His Twitter archive has been pretty much wiped, apart from a selection of tweets, including this fantastic quote: "They can't stop me, even if they stop me." Winston Churchill has tears in his eyes, mate. Or also, he's always had a hard-on for Drake.
But like Drake likes to say,
better late than never, but never late is better.
There was something missing from his content, and that was intellect. For me, as a casual observer, it's clear that he wanted to be noticed by the mainstream world. He wanted to be seen as someone who could be this voice of reason. He had already been regarded as an icon for many Muslims due to the religious overtones in his content, however, he wanted to go one step further. So once the water was tested with these skit videos, he turned to more thoughtful content. Fousey, being a theatre student, was clearly familiar with dramatic tone and knew how to pace his videos to appease an audience looking for content that was competent but fairly uncinematic. However, the simplicity does allow for the heavy-handed messages to come through even more and probably give it plenty of shareability to all your aunties on Facebook. However, on closer analysis, they're not the best. Obviously, in context, these videos are a few years old, and it's quite incredible how standards of content creation have evolved over the space of these few years. However, the production values aren't really what I'm concerned about. Making social commentary, especially as a inspirational bloke, is easy, as long as it's not under the microscope, and back then, with a sentimental piano, you could practically do anything. But ladies and gentlemen, the right opinion is not won over that easily. I'm a hard man. His first attempt was this poem, which has "River Flows in You" in the background.
I want to talk to you guys about the fights of love.
But the topic was too vague and was not hot button enough to get the views, though you can definitely see what direction he is heading in. Honestly, the first time he really tried to hit home with a deeper message was with his video Ramadan Nightmare, which I think is meant to be some sort of dystopian comic sketch, which is rather tonally confused. Part of it is the normal, funny because relatable, but then at the end there's just this montage of all these people suffering and a message to the tune of stop looking at what you don't have and start being thankful for what you do have, which me, the right opinion, deduced from the fucking placard at the end. This is a message that is worth saving for later. However, nothing can really top Why I Starve, a Ramadan Tale, in which he gives a lecture on Ramadan. Like his other video, it was generally with the same morale, with a slightly more creative delivery.
Shake that body, party that body. Shake that body, party that body. Come and have a good time with G.O.D.
I starve because of how full I am. Full of these blessings that I have been blessed with without even having to ask to be blessed.
And we have to be clear here, although we may find it funny in how contrived it is, a lot of people really connected with this content and the humbleness that he promulgated. He seemed like a messiah to many people within his fanbase. This was repeated on a regular basis. Some straw man would act ignorant, and then Fousey would swing in and give some inspiring speech, which kind of already explains something that people know, just in a more self-righteous fashion. But that's most motivational speakers, so who who cares anyway. He also had his third channel, known as FouseyVille, which sounds like a nightmarish district of Disney World, but he uploaded content on there a bit too, and although I found a few unlisted videos, the one that I really wanted to know what happened to was his video Keep Religion Out of It, which some very special man decided to respond to.
It is very simple for you to disable comments when we talk about Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior.
But one can only wonder what he preached. He also had a video posted which had a title like he was behind the scenes on a Drake video. Once again, a recurring theme. Fousey positioned himself as a man of virtue, a man of wisdom, and to the casual viewer, it might well seem like that. Fousey was clearly at this point going in a direction that gave his content a more religious, philosophical edge. He had constructed his content off his own identity, and outside of our horrible, judgmental commentary sphere, his delivery, albeit preachy, would come across as serviceable because of its mild-mannered intentions. However, Fousey encountered a significant problem with his content, simply that his fanbase wasn't really the one that would fulfill his dream. It wasn't the fanbase that was going to get him in touch with Drake, it wasn't the content that was going to have him propelled into the public spotlight. After all, the most devoted sector of his fanbase, you know, the ones who are going to turn up to meet you, were highly predominantly Muslim. And although there's nothing wrong with that, it also means that being an American, the population of your viewership is a bit more dispersed. They're just not enough to get Fousey where he wanted to be, which was this position of sheer autonomy, this guru, this absolute celebrity who would make the news for a slice of toast. But he was still looking for his bread and butter. So at this point, Fousey's videos are doing fine for views, but let's be honest, he's not making the splash that he wanted to. He's going to some conventions, doing some talks, but he's not devout enough to become a moral religious figure and not culturally relevant enough to become a bona fide celebrity. So he turned to prank, providing that none had been unlisted. The first visible video is the Hold My Hand prank, which was quite the segue from Blame the Terrorists, another serious video.
These are the type of people and the type of reasons I hate YouTube social experiments now. It's disgusting.
However, much alike to his sketch videos, he took a similar approach. These first set of pranks were to test the water. They cover fairly harmless topics. To me, they've always been awkward and unfunny, but plenty of people like them. Generally, I believe the appeal to these pranks is the reaction of these subjects, in part. I think the audience has taken interest in the human condition, and nothing is more authentic than a covert observation in which people react to an absurd situation. It's both real and dramatic. Now, obviously, with the knowledge that these are all fake, this appeal is undermined, but back then there was an extremely large demographic who went in with the premise that this was all real. It probably never crossed their minds that it was staged. After all, why would it? However, it all upped to Nap when he decided to integrate his social commentary with his pranks. Colossal covered this fairly comprehensively in his video, so once again, go and check his out. But to summarize, whereas his sketches with social commentary were obviously theatrically performed, Fousey used the title of Social Experiments to present these staged scenarios. The problem is that he often exploited hot-button topics for the quote good cause or some moral lecture. However, the audience ate this up because a serious look at humans was great for not just clickbait, but also fantastic for any shitty Facebook page to scream, "Oh my god, look at how horrible people are." It's a diabolical tactic, but it worked. Fun fact, fake news is much more readily shared by humans than robots, because of how emotionally provocative it is. Fousey himself even had these antics documented in certain articles, most notably the highly reputable Huffington Post. It worked at the time because it catered to people's agendas. However, it wasn't smiles all round. In Colossal's video, he clearly documents how Fousey tries to defend his actions through appealing to a higher morality, and how that appeal is misguided. Some may say that it was an attempt to hold on to fans, but for me, it was a self-justification for his own actions. Fousey had built something that he had finally wanted to. He had a huge subscriber base, and he wanted to do stuff with it. He wanted to pose as the moral icon, and with the monumental momentum, he reinvigorated his sort of Fouseyville content on Dose of Fousey, in which he'd typically do rather unexceptional vlogs, followed by a deep speech with swelling music. Unfortunately for commentators, the ends did not justify the means, and that's the thing that Fousey did not necessarily count on, and once all these pranks or social experiments were revealed as faked, their whole reputation was tainted. Nowadays, it's no secret that a lot of these pranksters were absolute moral vacuums. I look at individuals like Roman Atwood and see him trying to sell himself as a salt-of-the-earth family man, and I laugh. But there are people who absolutely love it, people who eat that shit up every single day. People loved Fousey. People still love Fousey. He made his channel a hub for motivational speeches, which is what he clearly always wanted to be, a motivator. Famed for his kind deeds, good messages, and philanthropy. And his social experiments gave him the platform to finally do that. He had that inspirational weight video, for example, which has now garnered 15 million views, and make no mistake, I'm sure it inspired some people. And now he had a new audience. What about that old religious image that he built?
I hate all religion. The reason I hate all religion is because religion is the reason for our wars. Religion is the reason people are killing each other in different countries. Religion is the reason people can't even live in the same land. Religion is the reason that people, you know, why we have so much animosity in the world, why there's so much drama going on the news.
It's disgusting.
Well, to hell with that then. And make no mistake, he may have changed his position, but such an incredible shift is hard to put down to time, particularly as he recently put out this image explaining that he hadn't prayed with pure intentions since he was 13. Considering he was in his early 20s when he made his more religious content, particularly of that of Why I Starve, I'd love to see an explanation of why he presented himself as a religious spokesperson. Fousey is what his audience wants him to be. There is no real steadfast morality, and yet he chooses to insert it into his videos to give him that reputability. It is his quest to be the champion of the people, and yet his methods are so objectionable it makes it hard for all the charity to ever feel justified. And this was all exposed when he admitted that all of it was fake. He didn't have any more to give to the genre. He'd smashed and grabbed, and it had given him something, but he wasn't Drake's best mate. What a shame. The problem is that in spite of all the good things in the world you can do with that money you make, the conventions were never particularly fond of pranksters because either they legitimately created disorder within communities or they falsely portrayed them. Fousey thought his ends could justify the means, and unfortunately when you're a company, a venue, anything at all, you have a reputation to uphold. Why would you want someone who may cause disruption? Fousey had a two-part plan: make himself famous doing whatever he can, and then insert himself into the mainstream eye by being a lovely bloke. He didn't think there might be a qualification required of actually getting famous in a respectful manner, and unfortunately he's not that special, no matter how many motivational speeches he makes. And when the idea that you purposely gained weight just to lose it for the sole motivation of a video is considered a credible theory, then you might want to take a look at yourself in the mirror. After you've lost the weight, of course. And it was likely when he hosted a venue himself where only a few hundred people turned up that he realised that something wasn't quite right, and that he hadn't immortalised himself. Many of us want a legacy, many of us want to be remembered, especially on this YouTube platform, and I think Fousey has such grandiose visions of what he wants himself to be that he's just not satisfied with what he already has. Ironic. He wants something immaterial, something to be remembered by, and when 375 people turn up to your speech, you realise you're being forgotten very quickly. Fousey wants to be this leading figure in whatever genre he chooses. The pranks gave him a significant amount of fame, but he didn't have the depth to carry that through as a legacy. So if you can't join them, then you just host FouseyCon. It's very easy to look at what's happening and see FouseyCon as the eventual capitulation of an internet persona. What did it really represent to Fousey? And above all, why did he choose to do it? Judging from everything that I gathered from his older content, it's like he's on a mission to create the ideal persona. The persona that is perfectly catered to gaining an internet legacy. However, the genres he chose in the past were not compatible with the type of effect that he was looking for. FouseyCon was just the point where everything broke. He got tired of trying to passively slide his way into the life of a celebrity, so he just decided to forcefully insert himself into it. Whether it was Drake, LeBron James, DJ Khaled, I could go on. He has a large subscriber base, 10 million, but it wasn't giving him the status that he desired. The thing is, Fousey always crafted his image about being inspirational, about being grateful for what you have and preaching all these moral messages, but deep down there was a person incredibly dissatisfied with where they stood. He was almost looking for a way to make his own personality sustainable. He wanted to be invited to the parties, the conferences, the conventions through the notion of just existing and making the occasional inspirational speech. Unfortunately, nothing he had ever done gave him that status, and he was still searching, yet he made the very strange decision to become more invested within the commentary side of YouTube, which really he should be doing the opposite, like all of the other ex-pranksters. Commentary couldn't be more against Fousey. Commentary is an absolute shitfest, make no mistake, but there is an extremely strong moral compass when it comes to conduct, and what he'd get away away with to his prank audience, he'd be completely obliterated within commentary. Ideally, he should be isolating himself from these people and running back to the community with the very unassuming fans, not the ones who are going to completely skewer him for every misstep. Why would he ever involve himself with such a group of people? Well, from my observations, it's because Fousey has a very strange approach to reasoning that makes his decisions. He has a habit of acting impulsively, completely on emotional response, and then attempting to create a logical argument surrounding it after he's already acted, even if that action was incredibly wrong, which can make for some very interesting scenarios. He threw himself into commentary because he saw the enticement of immediate attention, but never considered that that may flail long term. A famous example of his impulsive acts would be when he took down Colossal Is Crazy's video on him, clearly angry that Colossal sought to challenge the image that he wanted others to see. However, Fousey made up a ridiculous explanation of why he did it, firstly saying that it's incredulous that he should justify his actions because the video was about him. I mean, yes, of course. Bar all the fair use laws and obviously the fact that people always talk about other people, it's just a really stupid thing to say.
So about a month ago, there was a video made on me. Nothing new, happens all the time. It was about 40 minutes in length, exposing fouseyTUBE, why fouseyTUBE is a piece of shit, why fouseyTUBE deserves to die, all that good stuff. But basically, my network on YouTube is fouseyTUBE Entertainment Inc. If ever people use video files of my videos that I have uploaded onto YouTube over a certain amount of length, they automatically get caught under my CMS and they automatically get monetized for fouseyTUBE Entertainment because that person is using my content.
And then saying that he took it down because Colossal used footage of his mum and dad and dubbed over it, saying that he doesn't have to justify it before attempting to justify it, while also ignoring the fact that he was more than happy to monetize and keep the video up, allowing all those people to see Colossal mocking his family just as long as Fousey was profiting off it. It was embarrassing.
But the reason this video in particular caught my attention was because this video used footage from my mom and dad. So the fact that I even have to justify any actions that I took against the video that was made is just absolutely insane.
Fousey acts first and justifies later, and all this was on show with his latest event, FouseyCon, an event which he arranged very quickly and boasted a load of huge names that subsequently were proven to have never headlined anyway. I have no doubt that Fousey planned to include Drake to have all these huge artists performing because Fousey probably envisioned it that way. He already set out a list of goals.
Together, that night we are gonna dispel hate and change the frequency of life to love. We are gonna be, I'm declaring it right fucking now, YouTube's gonna stream this event. It's gonna be on the front page. It's gonna have over 1 million concurrent viewers. TMZ's gonna be in the audience. You're gonna be in the audience. News channels are gonna be in the audience. 5,800 people sold out for free at the Greek Theater, okay? And right then and there, all of us celebrating together, we're sending a message to the world that from that day forward, we're choosing love and we're gonna kill this hate shit.
However, when many of us set out our own goals, we always attempt to manage expectations. We wouldn't announce someone performing if they weren't confirmed. Fousey doesn't think that way. He thinks that with enough conviction, effort and belief that it will just appear in your lap, so he promises it in advance. But the world doesn't work out that way. On top of that, Fousey often claims this principle that everything is part of a greater plan. For some, this famous philosophy may help people react to unfortunate situations in a collective fashion. However, for Fousey, this allows him to devolve responsibility when things go wrong. He can say and act how he wants. If it doesn't happen, there must be a greater intervention. Example, if Drake turns up, people will view him as a prophet and he pulled it off. And if Drake doesn't, it just wasn't meant to be. It's God's plan. There are plenty of people who think his explanations are perfectly reasonable, perfectly sensible, partly because of the way he carries himself, the sort of positive, look what I can do kind of guy, where he talks about how he's going to make it through in spite of all these setbacks. I always receive the impression he's doing it to help his self-image, rather than help those around him. And that's the thing, in commentary, we don't give you a pass for just saying nice things. Speaking morally doesn't somehow absolve your wrongful actions. Another notable trait that came out of FouseyCon was how he responded to criticism. Politically, all over the world recently, we've witnessed the rise of populist figures, many of whom challenge the sort of mainstream establishment narrative that other publications and media propagate against them. Generally, what this point adopts is, these people have an ulterior agenda to stop me, therefore they will purposely misframe everything to cater to that. When people were challenging Fousey's testimony of how the situation unfolded, particularly figures like PewDiePie and DeFranco and Keemstar, he responded using this argument: you're seeing it from your own biased perspective. He was turning to them and saying, you have an agenda against me, so of course you're not going to say anything nice about my event. Now, in some instances, the idea that someone might have an agenda to misrepresent your situation can be a fairly legitimate argument, but given the amount of footage of the situation, the idea that what occurred is taken out of context is highly unlikely. Sure, people will have biased opinions on previous experiences, but that's the nature of discourse. As long as the facts are clear, then there's not much you can complain about. This identifies another problem that I regularly observe about Fousey. He has a habit of applying arguments that may be valid in certain circumstances to irrelevant situations. In the Colossal situation, you could make the argument that what he did was disrespectful to his family. You could argue that it was tactless, but then to go on and say that it justified a takedown is completely illogical. People may have an agenda against you. That doesn't mean that every time they say you fucked up means that you haven't fucked up. Other times his arguments may qualify as valid, but they're just a masquerade for the real reason. For example, he decided to turn off ratings and comments on all his latest videos. He then writes a tweet explaining that he did this because he felt that people were too prone to following the crowd, and by disabling everything, it gave people the full, unbiased experience. Wow, what a prophet. Now, this fact may be true, but it also exposes inconsistencies that say a lot about Fousey's principles. Firstly, it's interesting considering he never disabled ratings on his old videos that were well received by a majority of people, meaning that he only started caring about influential opinions when they were against him. And secondly, we're not actually receiving an unbiased look at the situation, we're receiving Fousey's look at it. Thirdly, it's funny how once again he sought to explain this a while after actually doing it. As I said, act first, explain later. And then he uses this argument that the event was free, so he's such a charitable man. And it may have been free, but it's not free to travel there. People shelled out money to see Fousey, who's made promises and let people down. He should apologise and stop spewing out rhetoric which represents a failed visionary who has dreamed more than he lived. And sure, some people may have been inspired by his speech, but there are more efficient ways to change people's lives than calling some of these people across the country for a convention that wasn't really as promised.
But okay, according to The Blast, Drake never met the YouTuber, he was never booked for Fousey's show, and he's never even heard of him.
Fousey has always had this dream of how he wants to be viewed and how he wants people to look at him. He wants to be this philosophical socialite, inspiring people to go out and act as he would. But I believe the desperation to make it there firstly led him to highly questionable measures with his prank videos and eventually took him here, to a state which isn't good, isn't healthy, and is just kind of destructive to certain people's lives. Fousey has created such a reputation for himself that the only way to redeem it is to start afresh. And even then, he'll have continuous mishaps hanging over him. He's had the time to rectify his errors, and he hasn't taken it. There are only so many chances you get. He had to do something new, and he had to make it happen, and no amount of post hoc justification can change what happened. Some people have made this out to be a sudden turn of him, but I believe it's all completely in line with his character. The same traits are there, they've just been taken to new levels in an attempt to gain some form of traction. If it worked, sure, it would have been fantastic, but there was an overwhelming probability that it wouldn't. However, sometimes when you're caught up in your own plans, you don't see that. Though I look forward to the countless explanations to come for exactly why all of us are wrong and somehow a higher force has led us to be, and this is our destiny. Makes perfect sense to me. Anyhow, those are my thoughts on FouseyTUBE and his recent turn. I would love to hear your thoughts too in the comments below. I love a good open discussion. I normally reply to comments in the first few hours and then I leave it for a bit. However, you can always reach me on my Twitter @TheRightOpinion, or you can reach me on Facebook too. I use that as well. I'll leave them in the pinned comment. I'd also like to give a big thanks to my editors who have done a fantastic job. Please go and check their content out. I have a stellar cast on this one in particular, and I know that these guys are all going places in the future. So go and check out their videos, send them some love, drop them a subscribe if you can. It would be much appreciated on behalf of the most handsome man in the United Kingdom. Obviously, I'm talking about me. Anyhow, I can't think of too much else to say. You can also join my Discord. I will be using that, I promise. I promise. I say this every week. I promise, guys. But yeah, no, I will be using it soon. Give me like a Saturday night, bouncing in, chatting all my shit. You know how it is. Anyhow, once again, lovely to see you here. If you made it this far, then you got Daddy Right Opinion's respect. Love you lots, lads. Take care. I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.